In the last video, I spoke into what makes me angry and what I'm doing about it now. And when I was speaking into that, I was speaking into being polite and complying. So, what is this response that has been conditioned into us from a young age? Now, you'll know the good girl, good boy kind of dynamic. So, we've been conditioned to put our own needs and wants and boundaries aside to stay in connection with our caregivers growing up, to make sure that we don't get punished or criticized or shamed, or maybe because we were trying to avoid the disconnection and the silent treatment. So the reason why we do this, the reason why we comply when we don't want to, the reason why we say yes when we don't want to, and the reason why we give a lot to others, it's with expectation, obligation, and minimizing our own needs, is because we've been conditioned to do that with positive or negative reinforcement. So this is similar conditioning to how you train a dog. It's important for us to know this. And the reason why is conditioning is not our authentic self. Conditioning is what we were taught to make sure we avoid any negative emotion. Whereas our authentic self is the part of us that has needs and wants to keep us healthy, to keep us thriving, and to keep us growing and evolving. So, this is why it's so important that we put our own needs first when we can, as much as we can. We're not going to be able to do that all the time, because there are times when there's a crisis, or there are times where, a lot of people who have kids, there's times where you can't put your own needs first. As long as you're acknowledging that and you can meet yourself later on, or you can make sure that you can meet your needs as much as possible, that's what we're aiming for here. Now, what I want to speak into today is that compliance that we've been taught. So the dynamic that this comes into is the dynamic of someone who's a taker and someone who's a giver. Now, the taker, people don't know that this is the sort of thing that they're doing. I'm using this as an example of the energy around certain people. A taker there's a few kind of archetypes of a taker. A taker can be someone who is often in crisis, and they are often talking about other people, how much, they're hard done by, and they're blaming others, and they, there's something maybe going wrong for them, and they're talking at you. Now, a taker doesn't tend to say, so tell me about yourself, what's happening for you, ask you questions to keep a conversation going where you're brought into it. They're often talking at you, and you get a sense of they just want to be heard, and they just want you to sit there and soothe them with no energy exchange. It's just you soothing them. For a giver, this is a common dynamic that you would have had growing up with a caregiver, whether it was your father or mother. And that dynamic would have been, they would have vented, and the way that you connected with them and the way they gave you positive reinforcement was if you were there for them, you sat with them, so they parentified you. They created a dynamic where you became also the therapist. You became the person holding space for them. This is the giver. The giver is very good at holding space for others. The giver is very good at knowing what others need. The giver often overgives and feels very drained, sad, and depressed after those interactions. So this is a clear sign of self-abandonment. And on the extreme end of self-abandonment is if you think of someone who's drowning, and then the person who goes out to rescue them, they've got to be very careful that the person drowning is not going to drown the rescuer, also them. So it's not going to drown them. So they've got to have the ability or the tools or the practice in rescuing this person without being drowned themselves. Now, this is because the person is in survival mode. They are trying to not die. They're wanting to survive. So they don't have empathy for you. They're not looking at you going, I don't want you to die. They're just concerned about their own life. So this is the more extreme end of that. on a more subtle end, it's the example that I gave you earlier on. So it's the person that speaks at you, can be quite anxious, can be chaotic, can be often things happening to them, and not very much interacting with you and asking you questions. There's another taker, though, that's even more subtle. And this taker is often the one that's very quiet, and the only interaction you get with them is if you ask them questions. So you're constantly asking them questions, holding space for them once again, and they don't really know what to ask you. They're more kind of timid maybe, or more quiet, and they tend to be people who don't really want to interact with you unless they have to. So that's also someone that takes because they need the other person to be very interested in them, to have connection. And they get this because people who are givers will move closer to someone without meaning to, who is quiet, wanting to soothe them. So if you don't honor that part of you that can hold space, that can give, and you can see someone, doesn't really talk much, and doesn't really have an interest in you, you might find yourself wanting to be drawn towards them and win them over and get them to talk and connect with you. So you're spending a lot of time and energy to do this. This is a common dynamic of the anxious and avoidant. And the avoidant here is the taker. And the reason being is they won't put in the effort because it feels too risky. It feels too much of a risk to put in the effort and be rejected, or be in fear of saying something silly, something wrong that they'll be judged for. So what's the best way to connect is to have people connect with you, and you not putting much effort into it. So it's sort of low risk. The reason why I'm bringing this in is because these dynamics play out often, and we often minimize and play them down because we've been taught to do that. And it's important as a giver, if you're someone that can hold space, you get curious about people, you really like connecting with people, you're warm, and you're giving, you're generous. That's such a beautiful thing to have, and you want to be able to have a even energy exchange with someone where they value you for that. They see you and they reciprocate that same sort of energy, because that's what's going to help you grow and evolve. So this is something where we've got to really be clear about our boundaries and our needs and wants, and when we self-abandon. So as I mentioned before, self-abandoning is when we put our own needs, wants, and desires aside, out of expectation and obligation, to make sure that we don't feel shame or disconnected from someone or judged or, guilt, any of those sort of negative emotions that we might be avoiding. So the thing with this is, though, you might not realize that you're doing it because of the belief system that you can handle it. I can handle whatever comes my way. Like, I can handle someone that doesn't talk much. I'll get them to talk. I can handle holding space, I can do that for them. They can't do it. So it's so familiar for us to do that. But it's also draining at the same time. And it's draining. So something that's familiar that we can do doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us. And this is where it becomes very subtle, and we've got to start to check in with ourselves. So this is what you can do after an interaction with someone, whether it's a friend, partner. This can be confronting too. A stranger on the street. After this interaction, notice what you feel in your body, and notice if you feel sad, angry, heavy, maybe down. Notice what you're feeling in your body, because that will signal to you information, and that information is what will tell you where maybe you had an unmet need, maybe you had an interaction that just didn't feel right, and there's a reason behind it. This is so important for us because we are interacting with each other on a daily basis, and our energy matters. Where we put our focus and energy really matters. if this is something that you resonate with that giving energy, and you're met with the taking energy, you will notice after the interaction with a taker, you will feel very heavy, drained, and it will feel like this emptiness. It's almost like that there wasn't very nourishing to be around that person. If this is something that resonates with you, I would love to work with you around this, to support you to build confidence around these interactions and to understand how you can step out of them and interact more with people who meet your needs, who are warm in return, and who you can connect with in a way where it's healthy and energizing.